Welcome to episode 48 of A Gamer Looks at 40. I'm Bill, and this is one of my favorite episodes to do. It's Side Quests, Volume 5. If you've never listened to this show before or brand new to the program, this is the place where I collect all of the clips and opinions and thoughts that didn't quite make the main episodes and put them together in this awesome little compilation that really just is a great opportunity to learn more about my guests and get further insights and hear more stories. Again, that didn't quite maybe make the main episodes for a variety of different reasons. Certainly not quality. So let's just start off with Redox PDX. She's an incredible YouTuber and streamer and a specialist in playing video game music on the piano. At the time of this recording, she had released a Castlevania album. It's, I think, 14 tracks or something along those lines of Castlevania music on the piano. It's sensational. It's so good. Castlevania, horribly underrepresented in this world of video game covers and renditions and arrangements. So make sure you check that out on Bandcamp. In these clips, Redox talks a bit about the new record, which at this point is about 5 months old. It's just how this works. A bit about her inspiration for doing that album and the JRPG that started it all. Let's take a listen. What we're going to be talking about today is a bunch of topics I want to touch on. But before we kind of dive into the meat of things, I'd love to hear about your music. As a streamer, I'd love to talk about your streaming as well, a little further down the line. Not only you are a great streamer of retro games for the most part, but you are a very accomplished pianist.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so fun watching you sight read. Some of these things you sight read, I'm looking at like, are you kidding me? And you're just working it through, which as you do when you sight read, but really impressive. It's really fun to listen to. It's one of my favorite kind of things to have in the background as I'm editing and doing things. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You do have a new record out.
I sure do.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, well, you said record, and I wish we could release it in vinyl, but I think on the Bandcamp website, which I use, I don't think I have the ability to unlock that. I think the record vinyl release is sort of like the Bandcamp equivalent of Twitch partnership, so we're a long way from that. But what I do have right now is a Castlevania CD album. The digital version is available through Bandcamp, where you can search up Redox, and you can find my website and link. It's bandcamp/Redox. And you can also purchase a limited edition CD release. The pre-orders for that one sold out, so I'm trying to get them back in stock right now. And I'll be posting up on the Bandcamp site and probably on some social media and talking about in the stream and so on and so forth, where we're able to get that back in stock. I was so incredibly overwhelmed with the kindness of everyone in the community that we sold out the pre-order in just 2 days, and that caught me completely unaware and unexpected. So I'm just truly grateful to everyone. It's been really delightful.
That's awesome. That's a big deal to sell out of that in such a short amount of time.
I was blown away. So
that's
yes.
Cool.
Thank you.
Why did you pick Castlevania?
Yeah, so I picked Castlevania for a couple reasons. First of all, for Halloween this past year, I played Castlevania NES and Castlevania tunes from, Symphony of the Night and a couple other games as well on a special piano stream. And it was super fun. And a few people mentioned that they enjoyed it so much that they would like to have the ability to basically have a recording of the music that they could listen to. And so I spent a few months thinking about how that could go and settled on the great website Bandcamp, which I've just gotten to know. It's a great way to support artists who aren't, record label artists. I'm a hobbyist when it comes to piano. It's my relaxation time. It's not necessarily my career, and so it's just nice to have a place to be able to support artists and put your music out there. And after I kind of investigated that, I determined that you can also sell CDs through their website, and that's what I have endeavored to do. So it's been really fun. The first album is 16 tracks. One of the tracks is a bonus track. It's an arrangement of the death jingle from Castlevania, the first game that I put together, just a little something different. Nice. And the other tracks are the OST from the NES Castlevania game, the very first one. So yes, I know everybody wants to know, is Bloody Tears on there. And no, it's not. That's going to be on the next one. So just be cool.
Very cool. Well, that's awesome. You stuck to the NES to 8-bit. That's interesting.
Absolutely. Yep.
Nice. And do you have a special connection to that game? And is that kind of why you were drawn to that?
Well, that's interesting. I've never played any of the Castlevania games as a kid. I actually found them as an adult, and I enjoyed them very much. The first two I have played all the way through, beaten, and loved both of them. The third one I got started on, but then Halloween was over, and I moved on to a different game, so I'm going to get back to that in the future. And one of the things that I noticed immediately about the Castlevania NES game was how good the music was. And when I did a search for YouTube and places to find the music, I just didn't find very much. There was just a giant Castlevania-sized hole in the piano libraries that I could find.
Wow.
So I spent a lot of time arranging and editing music from little fragments from different fans that had been put together and slapped on the internet somewhere. And so the creation on the CD is basically things that I have found and arranged and rearranged and combined and then performed. And so that's why I went with the original album, just because most of the Castlevania music out there for piano that I could find at least was Bloody Tears, and that's it. And I thought we could use some more tunes out there in the universe.
I think that's baffling, because the Castlevania music, like you said, is really not only good. I think everyone recognizes how good it is. It's well known. Like, Castlevania is a big deal, especially with the anime and all the other media surrounding it. That's amazing that this wasn't already out there. It's so cool you could fill that niche. That's really neat.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, totally. Very cool. Awesome. I want to let's want to dwell on music a little bit more, because obviously music is a big part of your streams. Were you classically trained? Kind of, how did you? Obviously, you're pretty accomplished at it. So obviously you didn't just pick it up, but I'm sure you've been playing for a while. How long have you been playing piano?
Well, I did start playing when I was a kid, and I did spend time definitely studying music, but it's so funny that you say that I'm so accomplished, because it's in my mind, I have terrible imposter syndrome with piano music, and I never think of myself in that way. I still consider myself, just an amateur. This is what I do for fun. So I really appreciate your kind words. Thank you. And it is my relaxation and creative outlet. When I was in college, I had the opportunity to play the piano a little bit in the jazz band, and I was able to continue with some focus and some lessons and stuff, and I really enjoyed music theory and just thought it was really fun and interesting and unique, and I'm just a big nerd for it. And cool. I took quite a few year break from piano after college was done. I kind of burned out on it for a while, and then one day I was at the music store and I saw a Legend of Zelda for piano book that was just sitting around, and I thought I should get that. And then it sat on my piano for a few months. And then one day I just sat down and I opened it up, and I remember distinctly the first song I played was Saria's song from the Ocarina of Time. Yep. And it was so well written and so fun that really brought me back to wanting to play the piano. And I started playing through that book. And then from there, I discovered streaming. And I met some of my favorite people of all time, including one of my friends on the stream, Hungry Goria, who encouraged me to play piano music for the stream. And kind of the rest is history. That's how I got started, just playing here and there, little bits on the piano or an afternoon stream, something like that. And then over time, just through encouragement and support of my family, I brought my piano up here into the studio that I do my Twitch streams from. And really now I'm finally, for the first time, able to really meld what I've wanted to do with my stream, which was blend playing classic games with playing the classic game tunes on the piano. And it's been just a delightful journey, and I'm really just super pleased of what I'm able to do with it right now. It's such a lot of fun. The fun of it comes through. Like, there's really a joyfulness to it, and what's nice about this, and I mean this truly as a good thing, is that it's not this perfectly polished product, right? Like I said, sometimes you're just sight reading stuff based off of a request. Hey, all right, let's give this a shot, and you try it. And even though it may not be perfect, you can tell there's a real care for the craft of it. Like, you can tell you really care, and you're trying to work on the things, and it's really cool. It's a fun thing to watch. You're not pretentious about it, well,
because I've watched other musicians on Twitch. I actually enjoy watching, I played drums as a kid and all through high school and that. Nice. So I like watching like drummers, and they're very precise. They're very careful. And some pianists are really, really tight, but yours is loose and open fun. And I really appreciate that. Just that openness. And that's daring too. That's like, I don't know. I'd be terrified. Like, no way.
I still experience that sometimes too. I'm getting a little better at it, a little better at the sheer blinding terror.
Do you have any specific stories about, it could be about any game, any era, kind of like an impactful moment or something, again, gaming related, that you feel like, wow, this was an impactful moment that you'd like to share before we close out?
So one game that really sticks out to me that made a meaningful impact on me overall, and this probably won't surprise you, but the game is Chrono Trigger for Super Nintendo. And here's why. As a kid, I never played RPGs except for Super Mario RPGs. And for years, folks said to me, Redox, you got to try out some of these RPGs. You got to play them. They're going to be great. And one day, I finally picked up a copy of Chrono Trigger. And I'm delighted that I was able to get my hands on it, original cart, and decided, okay, I'm going to break out of my comfort zone of playing platformers, and we're going to play an RPG here on the stream. Within just a few hours of playtime on the stream, I loved this game so much. It was overwhelming and confusing to stream at the start, and I felt really out of my depths, but my community was super thoughtful and supportive and helped me stick to my no, don't help me too much kind of guidelines, and enjoyed the celebrations with me when we achieved new things and found new things that were interesting and fascinating in the game. Because, you know, Chrono Trigger is one of the most story-rich and well-designed RPGs of the era. But what really made this experience shine for me was the continuity of the story and the music itself. So one night on the stream, a friend had said, something, I'll donate this, and you go buy the piano music book. And I was like, there's a piano music book? And we got around to a discussion on it, and this person donated enough for me to purchase the book, and that started my collection of RPG piano music books. So now, let me look at my shelf here. I have Chrono Trigger, the Collection of Mana, Earthbound, a Final Fantasy collection, and I think, what's the other one? Okay, those are the RPGs. And then I have also a Mario, a Zelda book, and a Star Trek, the theme song book of cool. Piano books that have been purchased for the stream to play on the stream and enjoy with the community. So really, Chrono Trigger kicked that all off. Everything that's already been said on your channel before about the game holds true for me, but I like its the way it lays out all the different endings and how the story itself is so well written and designed, in addition to some of the best music for the era.
Regarding that music, what would you say your favorite track from Chrono Trigger, and what would be your favorite track to play? Mystery of the Forest for both. Absolutely. Oh, okay. Wow. So that's I believe that's early, if I'm not mistaken, yes. Like early in the early 600. Is it 600 AD or is it 1000 yes. AD? 600. Okay. Yep. Yeah. I know exactly. As soon as I heard 600, I can hear it in my head, and I might layer it in here as well. But what about that piece speaks to you? It just stuck out to me right away. The first time I heard it was even before I had played the game, and I just remember thinking, what is this? This is so good. It was just amazing to me. It's very atypical in its style, but it's very pleasant to ears, I think, that have enjoyed westernized music. It has just enough interest and creativity. It blends sort of that moving line with different segments of melody. Like, it's just so good. Everything about it's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. I'm like literally smiling and thinking about it. Like even the opening, like piano. It's really very, very pretty. It's a good pick. That's awesome. And that's what's really cool about that story is Chrono Trigger. I think a lot of people have fond memories of Chrono Trigger, and for good reason, right? It's an all-time great game, right? I don't think anyone's going to argue that point. But it's really cool to hear people play it for the first time as adults and still get caught up in it, right? Still get caught up in the story and the play and combining texts and the characters. And it's really interesting to hear somebody talk about it, playing it, contemporaneously, right? Like playing it right now. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Huh. Very interesting. Next up, Alan Petrozzi talks about handheld gaming and some of the little more interesting or lesser known limitations to those devices. Lord Reverend D of the Rulebooks Anonymous podcast shares a story about sneaking around with a particular handheld console. And then Ryan, aka Games with Coffee, and I talk about how amazing it is when games comment on games. Getting all sorts of meta here on A Gamer Looks at 40. Let's listen in. For me, I think that 3DS version is the defining way to play it. Like, that's the way to play Ocarina.
I pray every day and night that somehow that'll just not be on a 3DS anymore. In some way, somehow.
Some way, somehow, because I don't know, as of this recording, I think you can still buy it. Maybe. I don't think you can. Or if you bought it, at least you can still download it.
It's buyable, I'm pretty sure. They also finally, I think, put it in their like Nintendo Selects where it's like $20 or something, or $30 permanently. It's nice.
Okay.
But I'm one of those people who like love handheld games, but handheld gaming doesn't love me. No matter what position I'm in at all, standing, sitting, anything, my hands fall asleep.
Oh, sure.
When I'm playing. And then all of a sudden it's like I can't even press buttons anymore because I don't know how much pressure I'm putting.
Oh no, that's a terrible thing to happen. Oh gosh, wow. That's a weird thing with handheld. Yeah, I don't play a ton of handheld stuff. Even my Switch, I leave it docked for the most part. I don't know. And my reason, honestly, is going to sound like I'm an old fart, which I am. My neck hurts. Like, looking down just bothers my neck. So I can't like hold the screen up and like stare at it straight on. So I'd rather stare straight on at a TV as opposed to be like looking down.
I agree.
Yeah. Something.
But also, yeah, it's because if I'm like in my bed doing it, playing,
well, yeah,
that's where it falls asleep even the easiest within like, I don't know, 10 minutes.
Gone.
And I can't play it anymore. Yeah. So I'm like, I wish everything had a dock.
Did you ever sneak your Game Boy around when you weren't supposed to be playing it?
Easily. Several times in school, and I got caught.
Sure. Oh, no, you did get caught.
I did get caught, but I got my Game Boy back at least, and it's like, okay, I just have to be more stealthy when I'm playing it.
I like how you note several times. Like, I tried several times and failed several times, but at least you got some gaming in, right? At least you got a little bit in.
Exactly. I just didn't learn my lesson not to do it while I was supposed to be paying attention in class.
And you also learned about the fallacy of school of school rules. It's not like they can take it away forever. They're gonna get it back eventually. You're gonna get it back at the end of the I guess in that era will be at the end of the day, right, or at the end of the class. So that's pretty funny. It's pretty good. I used to spend a good amount of time under the covers. You know, that classic story with the light that she'd bolt onto the top of the Game Boy. It just shrunk and my glasses were off because, I'm supposed to be sleeping and the glasses are off up on the dresser and I'm under there squinting at this tiny screen, barely illuminated. Oh man, that's fun. Sorry to get into a Game Boy digression, but I have a lot of love for the Game Boy.
Oh, such a great system. Such a fun system too.
Right? It just symbolized so much freedom. It's kind of how I landed on when I did a Game Boy episode at the very beginning of this show. Or this series. And what I landed on was freedom because you could take it places. And it was the kind of system that was yours. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're playing a game on a TV, it's everybody's really, right? People walk in, they walk out, your brother, your sister, you're watching you, etc. And even now, right? You play a game, your wife comes in or your partner comes in, etc. But when it's a Game Boy, it's right there in front of you. It's only you. It's as close to reading a book, I think, as like video gaming gets as a handheld. Because it's just that. That's all you can do. That's all you're focused on.
And you can easily just get sucked into the world of whatever game you're playing, just because it's you and the game.
And the world, again, it's a 4-bit system. It's tiny, right? There's not a lot it can do, but yet it meant so much. Again, that sounds really corny, but it really did. I felt like it meant so much because there was an intimacy with it. Right. Most games have a finish line, unless you're an MMORPG or, right? Those games really don't have finish lines. You're just done with them when you're done with them. But, and the quest to get to a finish line is really the sometimes the end goal. I'll say this to everybody who will listen to this podcast: if that idea of a game examining the nature of games is intriguing to you, I recommend Spec Ops: The Line. It's one of my favorites. You wouldn't think a game hidden behind a dopey Spec Ops title, like who would play Spec Ops: The Line? It's like another military shooter. Mm-hmm. It spends a lot of time doing exactly what we just talked about, questioning moral choices, presenting real moral choices, and investigating. Maybe the best choice is to turn off the game.
Right. Yeah. I'd also like to argue that Axiom Verge, both 1 and 2.
Oh, sure. I haven't played 2, but I love 1. Yeah.
Oh, man. One is so messed up because of the David Cronenberg-esque horror.
Love it. Yep.
But yeah, again, it makes you question the characters' motivations, whether they're really morally doing this for the right things, or if we're just doing it just because a bunch of machines told us to do it, right? So
yeah,
well, yeah.
I would even argue
you should really play 2. You should really play Axiom Verge 2.
Yeah, and I'd actually argue too, like Hollow Knight, even.
Yeah, I haven't played that one. So
yeah, I'm still playing on stream. I'm trying to decide if I should start it back up again. I got the bad ending, and as I'm need to get the better ending. The bosses are becoming pretty brutal. So I'm kind of deciding if I should just take the win as a dad. Take the dad win and just watch the good endings on YouTube and call it a day.
Yeah, my brother was the same way too.
Yeah, I might take, but that's another game too, where most of the enemies you're fighting are just like a couple of them just run away.
Yeah,
and you're stalking these, and they're just running away. They're no harm to you whatsoever, and it's like, am I doing the right thing? I feel like an evil villain, but game says move forward, so you move forward, and you sacrifice your morals, your personal morals, for the sake of this entertainment. And I think it's really interesting and fun to think about it that way, because it really, I think, adds a lot of color to a game. Next up, Andrew Craig talks a bit about Souls games, why they're kind of annoying, or at least he thinks they're annoying, and I think they're a little annoying. And then after that, Dan from Retro Logic and I have a big old long conversation about Hollow Knight and how that game can be pretty annoying, along with how we like to play in different styles of games, support versus attacking. And then finally, throw a little shade, just a little shade, at many people's favorite video game console. You make a very good point where with the Souls games, yeah, we're definitely more conditioned to that. But I also think people still like having games that are designed to move you through the experience.
Absolutely. That's why I don't play the Souls games.
Right.
They drive me crazy because they're way too big, and there's nothing that tells you what you should be doing.
Which can be frustrating, right? I mean, I've played, and I'll play Fallout games. Like, I really like the Fallout series, but at least there is some sort of narrative thread. Again, there's map markers, because that's just friendly to the player, in my opinion. That, for me, at least. I'm the same way. I don't play Souls games because I'm a dad, I work full time, and I just don't have that kind of time equity to spend on a game like that, where I'm going to get brutalized for an hour and a half and not make progress. Like, if I play a game for an hour and a half, I have to make progress. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I'm the same way. And on top of, I don't have kids, but I don't want to dedicate 6 hours on a Saturday to beating one boss.
Right. It's, I have, I think I've said on the show a number of times my Bloodborne story, where I spent way too much time trying to get past the first section and I just couldn't. And the answer I received was, well, tough. Just got to figure it out. And there's just something not, I want to say gamer-centric maybe, or person-centric to that just kind of really turns me off. So again, not
I'm
my
with
thing.
you. And then on top of that, being a trophy hunter, it makes it impossible to invest in the Souls games.
I can't imagine, considering your love of trophies and your quest for those.
And I absolutely don't mind putting a lot of time into a game. I platinumed Horizon Forbidden West twice, and I did the PS5 version first, so I couldn't import my save on PS4. And right now I'm doing the same thing with Death Stranding.
Wow. Impressive. I mean, so you're a person who doesn't mind putting in the work as long as the work has some gains to it. If that makes sense. And not to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. I want to feel like I'm progressing.
Yeah.
And the Souls games are very hard to get that out of. Zelda 2 was very hard to get that out of.
Yeah.
In fact, I feel like what made Zelda 2 doable was the coverage in Nintendo Power.
Yeah, that always helps.
Because it at least gave you a starting point to understand the way that the game works.
I'm playing Hollow Knight right now, and I'm doing it on stream, and I'm like 12 hours in, and I have people on there going, oh, I can see you're still kind of early in the game. I'm like, what? No, I can't be early. I'm like 12 hours in. Like, I need to make progress now.
Me and Hollow Knight do not get along.
I really like it. I like it quite a bit.
Here comes the butt.
I have a funny feeling it's me. I have a funny feeling Hollow Knight and I are going to get into some arguments. We're fine now, but I think as I get further and further in, it's just going to begin to completely annoy me because I don't know where the story is going. I don't know why I'm doing anything, and I think I'm the bad guy because like all these bugs are kind of cute and fun looking, and I'm just murdering them left and right. So. I don't
know. I didn't get that far. I got into I had a real problem with how it handled the punishment for death, and I said I literally don't have the time to play this game. If it's gonna make me re-trek every time I die with less power, then no, bye.
It's interesting. I would normally say that, and I have a very low tolerance for that Souls type of, go back and get your souls, after you were killed. I find it's not too bad. I especially if you're fighting a boss, the levels are designed in such a way where it doesn't take that long to get there, which also for me makes it kind of superfluous. It's like, well, what's the point? And there is a person that you can find like in your opening area that will actually retrieve it for you. You have to pay them, I think, but they will retrieve it for you for a fee. So if you really don't want to go back and get it because you're like, that dude murdered me brutally, if I don't get that thing, they're dead. I guess they're gone. I don't know.
I literally didn't know that existed.
Yeah, there is a little. Honestly, I don't quite know if that's real because I've never been in a position where I felt like I needed to utilize that person. Yeah. But I went there and the bug was like, oh, well, I can get you. You don't have any souls in the world. I don't have to do anything. I'm like, oh, I guess that's what you do. But anyway, I totally get it though. It's got that souls thing that I don't have a stomach for. And like last night I was playing and it was half an hour in. I had made no progress. I'm like, I'm lost. Where's a guide? Tell me where to go. Okay, I'm sorry. Like you said, I'm a dad. I got 2 kids.
Yeah.
I don't have time to not make progress. So. I was not to get on too much of a digression.
We'd be a good team if we ever did like Borderlands or something.
Totally. Oh yeah. Just camp me out someplace, snipe things, or take out objectives.
Cover me, and I'll just run in the chain gun or something stupid.
Oh, so good. I've always been in any game. I love support. I've always been like when I played Final Fantasy 14 obsessively for 6 months and then had to stop because I got a real job and I'm like, oops, I can't do this anymore. I was always a healer. I always play healer.
That's very nice of you.
Always. I
did
like
that in Overwatch for a bit. Just because like nobody ever wanted to do that, and I was like, that's fine, whatever.
No, I love support roles. Like healer, it's just that's the main one I guess you could say. But like my favorite games are among like the Deus Exes. I actually just recently played the BioShock Infinite DLC.
Sweet.
I'm not sure if you've played those.
I have the collection on Switch, and I have not fired it up yet.
Cool. BioShock 1 and 2 are great. Infinite stinks. And the DLC is good. The DLC is real good, actually. But the DLC is like all stealth and sneaking. And I'm like, oh, this is so my jam. I'm like super into this. Oh, it's picking off people one at a time. No one knows I'm there. Tee-hee. So good. You've made a very good argument for it. I'm not just saying that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. You make a good argument for it because there's a lot to like about it. And I think those who dislike the N64, again, there's people in our circle, as we know, who loathe it.
And you know what? It's okay to not have friends.
Of course. It's okay to be a solitary person grinding through some strange PS1 RPG.
Go play Resident Evil. That's fine.
All right, cool.
It's good.
Takes you 2 minutes to turn around.
It's so
Great.
good. Those tank controls, you gotta love it.
Oh, just crispy.
Tomb Raider. All right, no shade on the PS1. Love the PS1.
No. Just walk from square to square in Tomb Raider and fire into the air 85 times to hopefully hit a bat. That's fun.
But hey, it's
That's a
cinematic.
game. Yes, that camera angle.
Those
is
graphics.
That camera angle is just Tarantino. It's just like chef kiss right there. Once again, no offense to all of those PlayStation fans, I just didn't grow up with it. I didn't. But you know who I would love to grow up with? Who I would really just embrace as friends from the very beginning? My beloved patrons. Big shout outs to Dan from Retro Logic, who you are in the midst of hearing right now, Ryan from the Gamers Week podcast, Pete, Harney, Seth Sergil from the All End podcast, and Julian from Nerds Without Pants, the pantless one, joining the the crew of patrons here. If you want to do likewise, 2 thin bucks get you early access to shows and other stuff. Can't promise a lot, but for $2, what have you got to lose? Patreon.com/A Gamer Looks at 40. And I'm going to also take this moment to do a podcasty thing and ask for ratings and reviews. I always stick that at the end, but you're here in the middle. I mean, you've made it this far. You're likely going to make it to the end of this episode. Hopefully you do. We got a lot other cool stories to tell. But if you want to leave a rating and review on your pod player of choice, Good Pods seems to be a thing people do these days. So go and do likewise wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Coming up, Dan and I continue our chat by talking about the games that affected us and talking about how video games allowed us to win during an era where that was really hard to do. And then we close out our conversation by talking about one of my top 10 favorite video games for purely selfish reasons. Let's listen in. And that's, I think, one of the things that multiplayer stands out for me as well is, and again, I'm not sure as a kid if you were athletic or did sports or anything like that. But I was the same way. I played street hockey in New Jersey. I basically was Clerks. We were talking about that in the virtual green room. I basically was Clerks.
Yeah,
playing street hockey and whatnot, and that was fine. But I never played organized sports. What games and multiplayer did, especially during this era, it gave kids who weren't good at sports and traditional means of competition in schools at that time a way to compete and succeed.
Well, let me tell you, that really hits home for me because so I have ADHD. So academically, obviously not my strong suit. Also didn't play sports. So video games and the creative arts, which are predominantly non-competitive,
right?
Those were my outlets. And there's a statistic that says that kids with ADHD are given 20,000 more pieces of negative reinforcement than your average kid in their normal school situation. So a lot of negative talk coming my way from teachers and students and all that stuff. But video games, you beat a video game and what do you get? Great job. Congratulations. You're a freaking hero. And I'm like, okay, this is where I belong.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
That's a real deal right there.
That's cool, man. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Again, for me as well, I wasn't very athletic at all. And I was in band and I played, drums and and all that.
Band.
I was a big drumline guy. I was all about drumline. And so that stuff was always fine. Like I said, it wasn't competitive, but in games you could win. One of my favorite, little memories from my personally is going to an arcade and going to the Street Fighter cabinet and waiting in line to play against, a football player, the football player, wrestler type from school, and beating him in Street Fighter.
Oh my gosh!
And just owning him. I'm playing my main. I'm playing Chun-Li, which is my main.
Yeah, you gotta
and
love
I
that.
just I remember beating him handedly, and the sense of euphoria, because there's no way on this planet I could beat him in anything else. There's just no way.
Yeah.
So I think it gave kids a lot of agency and confidence too, right? I can come up against these guys. I remember one time in
Absolutely.
gym class, we would always get murdered by the football players, of course, and the wrestlers and the more athletic kids. And again, nothing against that, right? But those social strata existed in high school and middle
totally.
school.
Yeah.
Right. And
You're good at what you're good at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the one time they let us play hockey. They had like hockey sticks, but it was like on the basketball court. And since there was no goalies, they'd put the nets down, so it was a small area to shoot into, right? Because there was no goalies. And we played. It was a group of like 5 of us, and we all played hockey. Every weekend we played street hockey. That's what we did. And we're up against these football players who are looking at us like they're going to eat us alive, and we just murder them.
Oh,
we
yeah.
wiped the floor with them. They're getting mad. They're slamming sticks.
That's good stuff.
They're trying to check us too hard. We're taking penalties. Like, we're all like high-fiving these dorky band kids who just happen to also play hockey. That's what we did.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, man.
That's awesome.
So I think video games did a lot of that, and especially, and I think the N64, just to bring it back to that conversation, was one of the first opportunities for that to exist.
That's foundational. Totally foundational for me. Yeah. That's why it's one of my favorite consoles of all time and will continue to be. I do love some Marble Madness. The NES game has probably some of my favorite music.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And I'm surprisingly good at Marble Madness. Like, bizarrely so. It's you ever have a game that you're just good at and you're not quite sure why? It connects with you and you're like, oh yeah, I'm good at this game everybody complains about. That's me in Marble Madness.
I never thought it was that bad. I mean,
now
on a D-pad it's a bit rough, but if you have the little ball on the arcade, that's what's up.
Yeah, I didn't know there was an arcade, version until I did the show, but I always did it on the NES and with the D-pad.
You're a god among insects, is what you are.
Listen. I when I did that episode, I streamed. I'm like, I'm going to stream this and see if I can get to 100,000 points. Yeah. See, does the old 40-year-old man still got it? Do I still have it? And every once in a while I pop it on. So I pop it in, and I'm doing within 15 minutes I had 100,000 points within 15 minutes. Like, I can finish that game with 70 seconds on the clock usually pretty consistently.
I want to see you stream that.
I'll have to do another stream of it. I'll do another Marble Madness stream. It was a good time because my whole thing was like, all right, let's see if I can make it to 100,000. I got it, and then it was like, all right, let's see if I can get to 150, and I crested 150 twice, 2 or 3 times. I crested 150. Came pretty close. Yeah, again, it's just one of those weird things. It's the weirdest flex I have is I'm good at Marble Madness. And to close out this edition of Side Quests is a series of conversations with Daniel Greenberg of Winterian Studios. If you checked out the Final Fantasy VI episode that was released about a month and change ago, you heard Daniel's complete story of how Final Fantasy VI not only affected his life, but affected his studies and who he is as a person almost, and got to hear some really interesting deep dive opinions about a game that's been deep dived to death, or deep dove to death, I should say. But there was about 20 minutes more conversation that we had about a variety of topics, from the nature of difficulty in games to the age-old question of, are games art? And if they are art, how do we need to treat them as people and as ingesters and experiencers of the art form? He also shares a story of a friend who finished a game for what may seem like an arbitrary reason, but in the end was very personal. And then finally, a conversation of, are games just too big? Are games just getting too large for regular everyday people, for 41-year-old people like me, to ever possibly complete or enjoy? It's a fascinating series of conversations with a fascinating person, and I hope you find it equally interesting. Let's jump right in. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time today to join me for a conversation about some games that I know you love, and also a bit about what you do. I've been kind of reading up on Winterion and kind of some of the stuff y'all do on that studio, so I'd love to talk about that. But before I get started, maybe a quick introduction, kind of where people may know you from, and just some maybe your first inroads into video games.
Sure, Bill. Thanks for having me. So my name is Daniel Greenberg. I'm best known as a professor of computer game design at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, where I primarily teach first and second year students principles of game programming, game design, and game history. On top of that, you mentioned Winterion Game Studios. That was originally founded in Clifton, Virginia. We're now operating out of Maryland. That is basically a creative clearinghouse that we use for producing web academic videos about games. It's kind of split off into two projects. Most of the YouTube channel is dedicated to Ion Gaming, which is sort of a let's play with myself and my friends, where we'll tackle different games and kind of talk about the design of the games and some of the interesting facts behind them while we play them. But then also that is the same vehicle for which we'll go to conventions, Too Many Games, MagFest, Retro World Expo, etc. And we'll deliver academic panel lectures. The last couple we've done have been things like difficulty in games, full motion video in games, the history of the RPG as a genre, and so forth.
That's really fascinating, especially when it comes to difficulty in games. That is a real hot topic right now and has been for... Wow, it always seems to come up when a FromSoft game appears, or with last year with Metroid Dread, that was a big conversation, and one I've had a lot with guests. I'd love to kind of mind that a bit maybe later on, because sure. I'd love to get your take on difficulty.
It was definitely one that we kind of had to truncate.
Sure.
Because you really only have an hour to talk at a panel lecture, typically. Most conventions, you're scheduled for kind of a limited time window.
Yeah.
And so we challenged ourselves to kind of do the opposite. Instead of kind of talking about one subject in depth, we tried to touch on the basics on how to establish difficulty in about a dozen different genres.
That's cool. That sounds fascinating, because one of the conversations I had with, again, some other, just some friends and such, was... From a development standpoint, we don't know as just people who play games, but you have the experience as a developer and who knows that world, how hard it must be to tune a game to be either more or less difficult, and how it's not so easy to just put a difficulty setting on something. It's kind of where we arrived at. It's like, it can't be just flip a switch. There's so much tuning and balance that has to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I won't get too far into the weeds here,
Sure.
But two quick things I'd say. One, it's intentional design. I mean, when we talk about game design, there's so much more to it than just, level design. Not that level design isn't important, or coming up with the mechanics for a particular encounter, a particular boss. Sometimes it's math and spreadsheets and understanding, distributions and what you're asking of your player. They need to execute this perfect 3 times, or do they need to execute it well 5 times, or sufficiently 7 times? And the difference, between that, platformers especially, it's so much a stack of those things. And then the other side of it is there is no accounting for good QA. You cannot have enough QA, you cannot have good enough QA, because as a developer, unfortunately, you naturally become too familiar with your product, too good at developing, your game, and you need eyes on it that don't see it the way you do, that, attack things from the perspective of the consumer. And it really does have a huge, almost an outweighed impact on the final product. Yeah, I think largely, and I won't get lost in this topic, I think we are pretty much past the are games art question. I think so, the debate now is more high art or low art, right?
Sure.
I mean, you have... books can be dime store novels, books can be War and Peace. There are movie studios that will put out, deep, thought-provoking pieces to win awards at Cannes and then make summer blockbusters to help pay for the whole studio.
Right.
Plenty of plenty of mediums have both. And I think the argument is, do games have both, right? Do games have serious, thought-provoking art pieces, things, people usually cite Journey or Flower, and both are tremendous, choices. But games of that style, is that considered high art for games, or is high art for games when elements or assets for the game reach that point of being considered art? And I think that's kind of the fun debate right now. Is FF6 art because it tells an extremely profound story in sort of a unique way with an ensemble cast? Or is it art because, the soundtrack is sort of this amazing composition? Or is it art because the amalgamation of those factors creates something that has a message and is unique and is, contextual? Or is it low art? Is it just, really well-produced entertainment? Can it be both things at once? Mm-hmm. Probably. But admittedly a little above my pay grade. I don't want to, despite my title, I don't want to sit here and tell people, this is what you should consider art, this is what you consider not art.
And that's a very tough conversation. I actually don't mind taking this tangent. I will steer the ship back into Final Fantasy VI, but I love this conversation about the nature of games as art. And I agree with you. I think we can all now agree that at the very base level, if you don't think a game is a piece of art, it contains artistic elements. At least there's artistic elements within the work that I think would qualify it. And then, of course, you're just talking about quality. I would also go so far as to say, is there an art in just making a game fun to play? And I think there is. I think there is a science to it, like you were alluding to earlier, where all the math involved and all the balancing and everything. But is there an art to making a game fun to play, good in your hands? Because at the end of the day, even though you have your Journey and Flower and maybe you say Shadow of the Colossus, etc., in the end of the day, you have to play this thing and it has to be fun to play. Because I think that's the core of the medium, personally.
There's a brief part of me that is wondering if you have to play games to appreciate them as art. The more I see the communities evolve around content creators and streamers and people consuming this secondhand and getting the art contextualized for them, because part of what makes video games unique is that they are interactive, right? And that you absorb some element of the message through play. But apparently that can be experienced secondhand, right? And we've known that, I guess, for years. You can sit on a couch and watch somebody else play a game, and you can kind of get the same feeling that they're getting, even if it's not an exact replica, because you don't feel quite the same, maybe adrenaline that they have if they're the ones taking the action. And especially if they're an action game and there's some level of demand to what they do. It's a little different to watch somebody play Ninja Gaiden and then to play Ninja Gaiden. But that's not to say that the art cannot be consumed, extrinsically. It can be consumed from someone who is watching somebody else play this. And I think those communities taking off the way they have is a great argument in favor of games as art. Because if you think of most art as sitting alongside a nice little placard that tells you what it is and what medium it's on and having it explained to you by somebody who's, curating a museum, a streamer or a content creator can contextualize and give you sort of that understanding of the work, and you can experience that work without having to be the one driving the interactivity.
I think that's fascinating. I think that's an excellent point. I would say, though, that even though you can ingest the art of games in a variety of different ways, and I think that's a good thing, Because I agree with you. I think watching Twitch streamers and Let's Plays are fun. I think for Twitch, at least, a lot of it has to do with the person actually playing the game. And I think a lot of people watch Twitch for the personalities so much as they do for the actual experience. But I will say that it would just be like reading a book versus listening to it. You know, I can listen to a book and then I can also read it. And I think but there are different experiences. And I think the way you ingest it is just, I think it does impact you differently. Like if I'm listening to an audiobook, I don't tell people I read it. I'm actually intentional on that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm listening to such and such book. But if I'm reading it, I'll say I'm reading such and such book. And I make that distinction because I definitely ingest it in different ways. I'm listening to a book while I'm doing dishes and dressing a child and putting it, doing the day-to-day stuff. If I'm reading, I'm intentionally sitting down doing one thing.
And Bill, you know what that makes you conscientious of? Transmediation.
Hey, all right, there we go. Okay, fair. I went to a tech school, but I took one course in film in literature, and it was a course about how difficult it is to translate books into movies. And
it's tremendously difficult.
It's ridiculously hard.
Books into visual media in general is absurdly difficult to get right.
Right. So we watched a bunch of different films that try to do that. Like we watched Lolita, Stanley Kubrick's Lolita. We watched I think gosh, again, this was college, so I don't remember. We watched a bunch of different examples of this and talked about how challenging it is, right? So it's very interesting when you bring that up, because it brought up that memory of, wow, a book it takes you 8 to 10 hours to read a novel, maybe. I got 2 hours to show a movie. Like that's right then and there. You have a very limited amount of time to tell a lot of story, et cetera, et cetera. So I find it very interesting, but I think the way we ingest these things does change. And I think that's a good thing. I think also as people change, as the years go on, I know my son has very little attention span. He's 5, so it's interesting how these things get ingested. And I think that's fine. I think that's the way that evolves is interesting.
I will say a very close family friend of mine is playing Red Dead Redemption 2, and it's just gotten to the point where the character is happily married and they've built a house together. And I don't think he's going to play the game anymore because
Wow.
if you're familiar with it, the game's not over at that point, and it can really only go downhill from there. So I think he is
done.
He is too happy with the life that person has right now that I don't think he can bring himself to turn the game on anymore.
That's interesting. That's a very, very interesting reaction, and that personal connection. And I've played a bit of Red Dead Redemption 2. I played the first one, but not the second to any great length. But those characters are pretty well drawn. Just from the hour or two I played, I recognize right away, oh wow, this is definitely very character focused. I think that's really interesting that he may not. I like these characters in this space where they're at, and I don't want to subject them to anything else. I think that's very cool.
I mean,
think
I get it.
Yeah.
I played through Undertale. I got the neutral ending. I got the pacifist ending, and I turned it off. I knew what the only other thing I could do in that game was, and I didn't have the heart to do it. So I was like, you know what? I will just watch some videos or Let's Plays of somebody else. Like I want to hear those songs. I want to see those boss battles because I'm intrigued mechanically and musically at what's going on. But no, I don't have the heart to undo what I just did.
We talk about open world games. They're huge. They try to do everything. A theme park is a beautiful expression. That's a great analogy for that. It tries to be everything to everybody. We're going to do crafting. We're going to have an economy. We're going to have combat. We're going to have exploration, all that. Do we just should games start getting smaller? Are games getting just too big?
Well, I mean, it depends what you want in games. Right now, what the market is saying is that people want these kind of theme park experiences. And I think some of it is the graphics, and some of it is the gameplay, and some of it, unfortunately, is very well-crafted psychology. Now, I'm not going to say open-world AAA games are nearly as sinister as some mobile games, which are just glorified Skinner boxes.
Right,
But they
right.
do touch on a lot of instinctual human psychological behaviors, while simultaneously being very fun and engaging games that are beautifully produced, and they are tentpole pieces. They are the summer blockbusters for the movie industry. And I don't think you're going to see them stop making those or stop sinking assets into that. But I think what you're saying is very valid. I think there are a lot of room for what is not profitable, which is mid-tier games. There's just, unfortunately, the market won't really stomach it. People are willing to pay a certain amount for an indie experience or a small press game that is of a genre they like or from a developer they like. And there's an expectation of how much game you're getting there. And sometimes, you'll be almost overwhelmed with how great it is for that expectation, which means you're always going to have these indie gems kind of coming out and filling that niche. And for the sort of, I guess, the wider community, if you think of indie games the same way you would think of like indie films, right? People who are big movie buffs might know about that, how this came out of the Omaha Film Festival. It's amazing. You got to watch
Right.
it,
Yep.
But there's one theater that shows it in town at 10:40 p.m. at night.
Right. Right.
Right now, unfortunately, the majority of the oxygen in the room, for better or worse, is major companies taking 2 to 5 years to produce extremely large summer blockbuster style games. And the market right now is bearing out that this is absolutely what it wants. So I think for the near future, this is probably what we're stuck with.
Yeah.
There's going to be a sea change, I think, as the technology gets better, as we are capable of producing higher quality assets, that you are going to see smaller developers and indie developers capable of doing the things that you might have only thought possible by mid-tier, developers and studios. That you're going to start seeing works that are more elaborate, that are more complex, that fill that void. Because there's going to be demand in the space for what you're talking about. But I think it's going to be sooner filled by improving technology and the creativity of that group, as opposed to sort of the larger, more corporate side of things who, they've got their motivations, they've got their spreadsheets, and there's nothing really forcing them to tech down or to scope down.
Sure.
Right now, the market's basically telling them, hey, what you're doing is gangbusters, keep it up.
Yeah, keep going.
So I think instead you're just going to see, as the tech improves, the smaller press kind of reaching up to that mid-tier.
That's very interesting. And don't take it as I don't like AAA games, because I really do. I mean, I cannot wait to play Horizon Forbidden West, right? I'm really looking forward to playing that game. I love the first one. But I also really like playing the coin game, which is amazing little, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but it's this amazing little early access Steam game where I get to play coin games in an 80s arcade. That's what I do. It's so fun to play, like, the coin drop and for tickets, and you get tickets. It's fantastic. That's very interesting. I kind of agree. I would like to see games get smaller, more focused maybe. I think there is value in a curated experience as opposed to, again, the wide open world, because especially for story reasons, it's very hard to pace a story, in my opinion, in an open world game. I don't think open world games tell exceptional stories. There are exceptions, of course, because there's no pacing. It's
tough, right? Because if you're going to
really
give the players a
challenging
world to do, right, like you can follow along in the Magic Kingdom and take a 2-hour break to go eat and
right, exactly,
get your picture taken with Goofy, and maybe we need to go back to the car, and by the time you came back, are you still emotionally attached to what's going on?
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. If you enjoyed this episode, I really think you're going to love the previous 47, including all the tales from the bargain bin, including the random side episodes I just throw out there because I need another week to get the biggies done, let's be honest, but also because they have some fun conversations. I think they're good. If I didn't think they were good, they wouldn't make the show. I promise you that. I'm not giving you stuff that I think is a subpar. So I hope you're enjoying all the content coming out week after week after week. I'm on Twitter if you want to check that out. A Gamer Looks at 40 on Twitter. Also on Facebook and Instagram. I try to keep those updated, but Twitter is the main hub. Ratings and reviews on your favorite podcast platform of choice is greatly appreciated. I mentioned that before, but I'm going to mention it again just in case, I don't know, a horn honked as you were listening to this, or you ran over a branch and it snapped really loud as you're mowing the lawn. And be sure to check out the information for all of my guests. Everything is in the show notes. You can follow them, check out their work and their content and their stories. Every single one, interesting people that deserve to be lifted up and shown off and high-fived, virtually, if nothing else. Thank you again for checking out the show, and until next time, continue being awesome.